So scenario 3 is a researcher wants to see if adding punishment for not landing improves their performance on the landings. So for this to be ethically correct and able, you need to be able to tell the gymnasts what punishment they will be receiving. You can't be deceptive in what you're telling them. So, for example, if you're saying you got to do press ups as a punishment, you can't then if they do do a bad landing, you can't then tell them they've got to do sit ups because you told them press ups, and so that would be being deceptive. You've also got to be specific about what you're telling them. So you can't just say press ups. You got to say, I'm going to give you 10 press ups if that's going to be your punishment if you don't land properly. So you can't be deceptive. As you're adding punishment to the gymnast, you need to be very competent, and you need to know what punishment would suit what gymnast best. So if one of the gymnasts had for example, say a heart problem, you wouldn't make them as a punishment lift weights or do any high intense activity that would put pressure on their heart, because obviously then that's putting the athlete's health in danger. You also need to give the gymnast the option to pull out of doing the punishment and give them the option to stop, because obviously if they do say I want to stop and the researcher ignores that, then that is breaking the law, and then the gymnast could then cause problems for the researcher by pressing charges, taking them to court, anything like that. So scenario 4 is a researcher wants to see if gymnasts learn new moves on the pommel horse easier if they're being coached individually. So on the consent part again, you need to let them know exactly what kind of skills they'll be, or new moves they'll be learning. You need to tell the gymnasts that they're going to be being coached individually to make sure that they're comfortable with that. And if they're not comfortable with that, then you won't be able to do the research on that gymnast. They should also tell the gymnasts the possible risks of doing the new move, because obviously if it is too risky for the gymnast liking, they don't want to do it, then they shouldn't have to do it. So you need to let the gymnast know exactly what is going to be involved in doing the new move before they try it. On the competence side of things, the researcher needs to make sure that the gymnast teacher is capable of teaching the new move, and that they have the training skills to teach the gymnast the new move, because if they don't and something did happen to the gymnast, then there could be a lot of trouble for the trainer and the researcher. One, for putting the trainer in charge of it, so the researcher get in trouble, and the trainer would also get in trouble for teaching something that he's not qualified to teach. Finally here, the researcher would need to make sure that the gymnast teacher is coaching each individual in the same way and treating each individual fairly and giving them the same amount of support as everyone else, as all the other gymnasts are trying it. Scenario 5 is a researcher wants to see if smokers and non-smokers perform differently when doing the same routine. So to start off with here, you'd have to make sure that all the people taking part, all the gymnasts taking part, are competent enough to do the routine, and so the routine can't be too hard for any of the gymnasts, because then if something were to happen, like an injury, when they weren't supposed to be doing a skill move or something that was in the routine, then the researcher could get sued. The researcher would also have to take into account that the smoker's endurance would probably be a lot less than the non-smokers. So the routine couldn't be too long, because if it was, then obviously there would be a difference in performance, because the smokers level of performance would drop after their muscles ran out of endurance, but then while the non-smokers could carry on doing it. The researcher also has to give everyone, but this applies more to the smokers, the right to withdraw, because obviously if they can't take any more, they're going to need to pull out for the sake of their own health. The likelihood is that the non-smokers would perform the routine better. So when you're giving the results back to the smokers, you'd obviously have to be very professional about the way, and when you tell them the results, you'd have to be considerate and just offer them the best advice possible. You couldn't be rude about the way they perform the routine. You'd have to just give advice, and obviously that advice would be to give up smoking. If the research wasn't competent throughout this whole process, then it can have knock-on effects for the researcher. The researcher could lose the accreditation for the research, and that would lead to losing funding in the future from anyone who's supporting your research. You can also lose your status within BASIS, and that can have serious effects, as when you're trying to conduct future research or experiments, the local ethical committee might allow you to do the research or experiment that you're asking. This is why it's essential for all researchers to be very professional and while doing their research, and carrying them out with extremely good conduct.